That was the very first test of this stylophone that I bought last year. You may remember the previous video. This poor old thing that I got from eBay has been stuck in a shed for years, absolutely full of rust and dead spiders and all sorts. And I set about attempting to resurrect it and get it all working again. Here's a few shots of when I very first opened the package. Most of this was featured in the last video. Certain parts like the speaker, bless it, just didn't survive at all. But crucially, there was no damage to the copper traces on the circuit board. Most of the passive components, some of the capacitors you can see there, look at C12, C20, were missing completely, even though the legs were still, as you can see on C8 there, they were missing completely, but the legs were still in the circuit board. A little later on, there we go, we did find some of the batches of capacitors were completely shot. So that was simple enough to replace a few bits like that. I did notice, and again in the case of the electrolytics there, I did notice on a few of the components there seemed to be 3 different batches, and it was one mainly that was incredibly difficult to identify some of them. There were even a couple of areas on the board that were originally unpopulated, so these were almost a bit of a red herring at first. There I was cleaning the pen up. I used a bit of brasso and then isopropanol, and then stripped all the switches from the circuit board. Very simple to unscrew from the back. They were really crusty underneath. And then the switches were cleaned there in soapy water and oxy detergent, my usual method. Much of the back of the board was cleaned with acetone to get a lot of the gunge and old flux off. And then I started to reassemble it with the new switches and hooked up a little speaker. As I was reassembling it, one of the little resistor packs from the keyboard fell out. The legs on it were extremely short, so I had to remove it and resolder it, and then finally assemble it there. The speaker was borrowed out of a little Yamaha keyboard I repaired around about the same time, and I didn't want to glue it into the case, so I fixed it on one corner of the post, and I used a bit of tape at the other for a temporary fix. Now there's a couple of important parts in this. They are complete unobtainium. First one being the amplifier chip. This is the Motorola MFC 6070. This is quite a delicate chip that even on a stock machine running on original Pt2 batteries is under quite a lot of stress. 18 volt supply as dictated by the original spec is very close to the upper tolerance of the chip, and a lot of them actually used to fail. I'd like to give thanks to Andy Merkin at this point of andymerkin.wordpress.com, who's written quite a bit about this situation and warns that anyone attempting to mod a Stylophone 350S for an external jack socket, as I did with mine, is better off to run it at a lower voltage. Don't try and chase 18 volts because you're not taking into account internal battery resistance that you'd have on a depleted set of batteries. It's really close to the upper limit of this chip, which is incredibly difficult and often expensive to find. I mean, look at it, it just looks like nothing of a modern application. The other chip is this General Instruments chip, which is a frequency divider. Much of the Stylophone circuitry is very similar to transistor organ technology of the time, which commonly used a single oscillator and then a frequency divider. Again, a very unusual package. These two chips you won't find, so you really don't want to risk any damage to those two ICs. That's why when I first connected the circuit board up, I brought it up on a 9 volt power supply, then a 12 volt power supply, and then finally settled on a 15 volt power supply to run it to get the most efficiency out of the amplifier without overloading it. If I'd have just put an 18 volt power supply and there'd have been a short transistor or any other shorts anywhere else, I could have risked damaging those chips, and I didn't want to do that, so I was very, very precious, very, very careful with this. Luckily, both chips were functioning okay. Now, getting on to a demo of the Stylophone, I prepared this earlier pretty roughly. We have the power button, the voice registers on the side. They work much the same as a transistor organ in footings. There's a vibrato switch, and here we've got a reiteration switch, which is kind of like an LFO really. There's 2 speeds on it. So if you select the other speed there, you get the faster one. And then going back to the right hand pen, you've ordinarily got a just a static tone, but you can push these switches in and get a percussive tone in 2 different lengths. And then for some reason the photo switch, which controls the photo sensor on the side, my unit is much louder with it on, so there could be another part there that's got high resistance maybe. There we go, that I haven't found yet. But it's really effective with the photo controller, great fun. You could even shine a torch into that and whatever you want to do. But generally I just leave that on because it seems to make the output much hotter. And there's a tuning control. You will need that because it does drift quite a bit. And you can run each of the voicings in any combination more or less you want. Notice that that one goes very quiet, so again I think there's still a couple of bits that I've missed. The strings section is a little thinner sounding, and the woodwind section, as it's called, is a bit sort of brassier sounding in a sense. So it's just different filter settings, different resonances that give it slightly different tones. The pens never quite stay in. It can be really fiddly to use that part. And I'm also a left-handed person, so I naturally want to hold a pen in my left hand, of course, so sometimes the 2 pens, I'm always swapping them around. If you want to make a bit of techno, you can turn on the reiteration switch, put that through a bit of delay and overdrive, and away you go. I have actually done that on part of the Kuso soundtrack. Something I started with this stylophone turned into basically hardstyle techno, which was quite amusing. So that's that. Great fun. Just a quick shot of the back again. I did have to take the back off this earlier on because it was cutting out on me. As I say, I still think there's a couple of things that I need to perhaps put a scope on, check the oscillator circuit. Sometimes, I think the amp circuit's fine, but the oscillator circuit I think is sometimes stopping. The tuning can drift as well. And as you can see there at the top, I've just got a ferrite bead on the power input just to filter off any noise that comes on the power input. There's absolutely no shielding on this, so it is quite prone to interference from computers and such, which obviously in 1973 wouldn't have been around. So it may be an idea to shield it at some point. I do run it through a DI box as well, as I have done for this demo, just to isolate it from computer audio interfaces and such. There you go, just a very quick demo. There are other better demos of its sounds and such online in other videos, but I thought I'd just do a quick demo of where I am and how I've got it working. So again, a big thanks to Andy Merkin and from Anthony from stylophone.com, who helped me out with a couple of the capacitor values that I couldn't read off the capacitors themselves because they were completely shot and split, and I managed to get those replaced and get it up and running. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed.